Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you, and welcome to all our dear followers everywhere. The Greatest Secret channel, under the supervision and management of the writer and author Mr. Mohammad Salim Al-Kazimi, Al-Maqdisi, is pleased to welcome you to this renewed encounter and to announce the launch of the new and highly anticipated season of the legendary debate between the atheist and the Muslim. This season comes to unveil the most prominent intellectual issue of our time, which revolves around the dilemma of atheism in denying the unseen world.
From an audio article to the grand debate. This intellectual discourse began as an audio article in 3 international languages, Arabic, English, and German, authored by the channel's director, Mr. Mohammad Al-Kazimi. You can always access it via the link in the description box below this video on the Greatest Secret YouTube channel. Given the significant and remarkable interest this topic has garnered, and the exceptional engagement and numerous insightful comments and contributions we have received, especially from our German and English-speaking followers, the channel's management has decided to transform these discussions and scholarly responses into a visual and audio format. These responses have been structured as a legendary debate, spanning several episodes, totaling over 10 hours of philosophical and scientific research and analysis.
Why is it an exceptional debate? Contemporary and sensitive topics. The episodes address issues that touch upon the very essence of human existence and speak directly to the human mind in our present time. Comprehensive approach. This is a global debate that excludes no one, opening the doors of thought to every thoughtful seeker of truth on this planet.
Share your opinions with us. We hope you enjoy this engaging and intellectually stimulating program. We at the channel's management encourage anyone with a comment, viewpoint, or contribution to share it with us in the comments section. We are open to hearing your opinions and are fully prepared to discuss them politely, objectively, and with mutual respect. Be there, and we hope you enjoy the show.
The Muslim says, the claim that life appeared purely by coincidence conflicts with the astonishing precision governing the structure of the universe and living beings.
The atheist's comment. First, we can throw out the universe part. Obviously, there wouldn't be life if matter and stars weren't a thing. The question, then, is whether, given a universe of chemistry, living systems could arise on their own on the basis of the same things that make the 15% of the matter in the universe that we actually understand. And the answer looks very much like yes to anyone who isn't an expert. Even experts almost all think it less about if and more about exactly how.
The Muslim replies, this response doesn't actually answer the question posed. Rather, it presupposes the conclusion. The question wasn't, do chemical elements exist in the universe? That's undisputed, but rather, how did these elements transition from inanimate, non-living matter to highly organized living systems capable of genetic encoding, self-replication, repair, and adaptation? Furthermore, your assertion that the matter is very clear to any non-specialist is neither a scientific nor a philosophical argument, because many of the most complex scientific issues appear clear until one delves into their details. As for the claim that the question has become how rather than whether, this reflects a research approach among some scientists, but it doesn't mean the problem has been solved or settled. We still lack a complete and closed experimental model that explains the emergence of the first living system capable of preserving genetic information, reproducing, and evolving from non-living matter alone. Moreover, the philosophical problem runs deeper than simply the existence of suitable chemistry. Even if we assume the existence of a possible chemical pathway, the question remains, why do the laws of the universe allow for this immense level of order, precision, and complexity that makes life possible in the first place? Simply mentioning the existence of stars and elements doesn't explain why physical and chemical laws are so precisely structured to make life possible in the first place. Therefore, this discussion isn't a denial of scientific research or biochemistry, but rather an objection to the leap from, we have promising hypotheses about some chemical processes, to therefore, there is no philosophical problem or indication of design or intention. This leap is far greater than current data allows. The Muslim says they observe a precise and interconnected system.
The atheists comment. Only if they're not paying attention. Most of reality is anything but precise. Worse, we don't even observe most of the universe at all. Visible matter and light make up about 5% of the universe. About 70% of it is dark energy, which we have no idea what it is, and 25% is dark matter, which, again, we have no idea what it is. But even among the 5% we can observe, 40% of that is missing. It's presumed to be dust scattered between galaxies. Does that sound precise to you? So of the about 2.5% of the universe we actually understand, that includes planet-sized objects. Of those, 99% don't orbit stars. Does that sound precise to you? There's an asteroid belt between Earth and Mars. Most of the asteroids that hit Earth come from Jupiter, knocking them out of orbit and sending them our way. Does that sound precise to you? Technically, due to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, we can't even be entirely sure it is precise.
The Muslim replies, here you are confusing the existence of cosmic chaos or violence with the absence of order. Order does not mean that the universe is calm, perfect, or free of collisions. Rather, it means that phenomena, however complex they may seem, are governed by constant laws that can be understood and predicted mathematically. In fact, all the examples you mentioned are fundamentally based on the existence of this order. We discovered dark matter and dark energy because there are regularities in the movement of galaxies and gravity that do not conform to current models. We can calculate the orbits of asteroids and their collision probabilities because the movement of celestial bodies is governed by stable laws. Even Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is not chaos without order, but rather a very precise mathematical relationship within quantum mechanics. For example, the uncertainty principle itself is expressed by a constant mathematical relationship, delta x, delta p, delta q, delta superscript 2. It does not say that the universe is disordered, but rather precisely defines the limits of possible measurement within an ordered quantum system. Our ignorance of a large part of the universe does not imply the absence of order, but rather the limitations of our current knowledge. To say we don't understand everything, therefore there is no order, is logically no different from saying I don't fully understand the language, therefore it has no rules. The existence of asteroids or cosmic catastrophes does not negate order. On the contrary, they occur within the framework of extremely precise laws of gravity and physics. Apparent chaos is one thing, and the absence of organizing laws is something else entirely. Therefore, the debate is not about whether the universe contains violent events or unknown regions, but about a deeper truth, that the universe, despite its vastness and complexity, is remarkably amenable to mathematical and scientific understanding, and this very amenability is W. Hat is meant by order and coherence. The Muslim says, such order does not point toward chaos or absurdity.
The atheists comment. Order arises out of what seem like chaotic systems all the time. All that's required is consistent interactions, and you can make observations that look like order sometimes, chaos other times. Langton's ant is a good example of this. Small, consistent interactions. At the start, the results look orderly. Everyone sees it. Then it dips into chaos. Nothing seems to match anything at all, there's no apparent order to any of it, even though it's doing exactly what it was before. Everyone sees that, too. And then, later still, order emerges. No planning is required for this, it happens because things are what they are and do what they do.
The Muslim replies, the Langton ant example doesn't refute the idea of order. Rather, it confirms it more clearly than you might imagine. This model doesn't operate in a chaotic vacuum, but relies entirely on fixed and precise rules that are consistently applied. If these rules weren't inherently regular, no complex patterns or behaviors would ever emerge. In other words, the emergence of complex patterns from simple interactions doesn't explain the origin of order. It presupposes it. Even in the Langton ant example, there are specific rules for movement, clear cell states, regularity in the application of instructions, a mathematical framework governing the entire process. Without this organized structure, neither chaos nor order, nor the transitions between them would ever occur. Furthermore, the assertion that order can arise from seemingly chaotic processes fails to answer the deeper philosophical question: why do fixed laws exist that allow for the emergence of such complex behavior in the first place? Because complete chaos doesn't produce laws. It precludes any possibility of prediction, repetition, or the emergence of patterns. Even your description of the stages as organized, then chaotic, then organized again, presupposes a mind capable of discerning patterns according to fixed logical and mathematical rules. Therefore, citing emerging systems does not negate the issue of order. Rather, it shifts the question to a deeper level. Where did the fundamental rules and constants that allow these emerging patterns to arise in the first place come from? The Muslim says, the realm of the unknown remains vastly greater than the realm of the known.
The atheists comment. Then why claim there is a God? After all, if almost all of reality is unknown, how can you state that you know this unevidenced thing has actual existence?
The Muslim replies, the statement that the unknown is wider than the known does not mean that every inference about reality becomes invalid or impossible. Otherwise, all science and philosophy would collapse. We often infer things we don't directly observe from their effects and the plausibility of their explanation. We haven't directly observed most of the universe, yet we infer the existence of dark matter and dark energy from their effects. No one has ever seen gravity as an independent entity. Rather, we infer its existence from the regularity of phenomena. Similarly, inferring the existence of a creator is not a claim to know all the unknown, but rather an attempt to explain * the existence of the universe instead of nothingness, * the regularity of laws, * the comprehensibility of the universe, * the emergence of consciousness, reason, and meaning. Furthermore, I am not asserting this in the empirical sense of a laboratory experiment, because the issue is fundamentally philosophical, not experimental. Questions concerning the origin of existence cannot all be reduced to laboratory experiments, as they relate to the very framework upon which experimentation itself is based. What is striking here is that invoking the unknown can also backfire on the materialist argument. If most of reality is indeed unknown, how can we assert that reality is limited only to what is material or observable? Therefore, acknowledging the limits of knowledge does not necessitate atheism. On the contrary, it can make openness to the existence of something beyond the material a legitimate philosophical stance, no less rational than its denial. The Muslim says, atheism's claim to possess absolute truth.
The atheists comment. It doesn't. Straw man. And this seems deliberate at this point.
The Muslim replies, if atheism is simply defined as disbelief in the existence of God, then the statement requires clarification, as some atheists present their position as one of disbelief, not as a complete possession of absolute truth. However, objections remain regarding certain atheistic arguments that go beyond mere disbelief to adopting a comprehensive materialistic worldview that considers reality to be limited to what is material or observable, and that non-material explanations have no epistemic value. Here, the position becomes closer to a broad philosophical claim about the nature of truth and existence, rather than simply a suspension of judgment. Therefore, the statement does not mean that every atheist claims absolute knowledge of everything, but rather that some atheistic discourses treat the materialistic explanation as if it were the only acceptable framework for truth, even though questions of consciousness, logic, the origin of laws, and the origin of existence remain the subject of profound philosophical and scientific debate. Describing the statement as straw man or intentional does not negate the need to discuss the idea itself. If there is an objection to the generalization, the wording can be corrected, but that does not invalidate the core of the debate about the limits of material interpretation and the possibility of something beyond matter. The Muslim says, appears to be a form of intellectual arrogance.
The atheists comment. LOL. You're accusing atheists of being arrogant while you are the one proposing a timeless, spaceless, immensely powerful, magic, thinking thing and then further claim this thing is responsible for everything else. Then you further claim that this thing which made more galaxies than you can count cares about you. And you call atheists arrogant.
The Muslim replies, the issue isn't the grandeur or strangeness of the idea, but rather whether it's presented as a plausible philosophical explanation. Belief in a creator who transcends nature isn't a claim that humanity is the center of the universe. On the contrary, it's acknowledgement of humanity's insignificance in the face of a reality far greater than itself. As for describing the idea of God as magical, this is merely a rebranding that doesn't invalidate the idea philosophically. If the fundamental question is about the existence of time, space, and laws, then naturally, the proposed explanation shouldn't be subject to these very things. Otherwise, it would be part of the problem, not an explanation. Furthermore, believing that the creator of the universe cares for humanity doesn't mean that humanity is more important than galaxies. It means that value isn't measured solely by physical size. Consciousness, intellect, meaning, and morality aren't things measured in kilometers or mass, so we can't say that a galaxy is more important to humanity simply because it's larger. As for describing some atheistic arguments as intellectual arrogance, this sometimes refers to the absolute certainty that all of reality can be reduced to matter alone, and that everything beyond direct sensory perception is merely illusion or superstition, even though many questions of existence, consciousness, and meaning remain open. Ultimately, philosophical issues are not resolved by ridicule or by exaggerating the strangeness of an idea, but rather by its ability to explain reality and its logical consistency. The Muslim says, Islam establishes a true balance between reason and the unseen.
The atheist's comment. Islam puts forth many things which are factually false, as well as showing their God is either a liar or not all-knowing, either of which refutes the claims to the contrary. There's no balance. All you have is, trust me, bro, for the wilder claims it makes, nothing more.
The Muslim replies, this response doesn't address the concept of a balance between reason and the unseen, but rather replaces it with a linguistic sarcasm. Believe me, brother, without engaging with its epistemological content. The issue of knowledge through revelation, in the Islamic perspective, is not a demand to abolish or replace reason. Instead, it is based on distinguishing between two types of issues that reason and experience can reach, and issues that pertain to what lies beyond the scope of direct experience, such as the origin of existence, ultimate meaning, and the afterlife. Here, reason is not rendered ineffective. Rather, it is a tool for understanding revelation itself, examining its internal consistency, and demonstrating its very possibility. As for the unseen, it is not a rejection of reason, but rather an assertion that reason is limited by its natural domain and cannot, on its own, encompass all levels of reality. Furthermore, reducing the concept of revelation to believe me is a gross oversimplification that fails to reflect the structure of this type of claim in religious philosophy, which typically relies on a set of arguments, such as the question of the origin of existence, the consistency of the universe, the experience of human consciousness, moral meaning, and others. Regarding the claim that God is a liar or ignorant, this is a very strong judgment that requires consistent internal proof, because the mere existence of difficult texts or interpretations does not logically negate truth or knowledge. Therefore, the issue is not one of blind belief versus automatic rejection, but rather a comparison between two explanatory models, one that confines reality to matter alone, and another that accepts the existence of levels of knowledge that transcend it. The philosophical debate revolves around which of the two models is more capable of explaining the totality of phenomena, not about reducing one to a sarcastic slogan. The Muslim says, there are realities which can only be known through divine revelation.
The atheist's comment. In other words, trust me, bro.
The Muslim replies, I can respond that your comment distracts from the core issue, as you have replaced argument with mockery. That wasn't my point. I didn't say, trust me, bro, rather I said, if the existence of an omniscient and truthful God is supported by rational evidence, then his revelation of things beyond reason and experience becomes a valid source of knowledge. So it's not about trust me, bro, but rather, is the reliability of the source of information proven? If so, then accepting his information is a matter of rational thought, not blind faith. Or to put it more succinctly and clearly, reducing revelation to the phrase believe me is a fallacy. It's not about faith without evidence, but about first verifying the credibility of the informant and then accepting his information. We don't believe in revelations because they present themselves as such, but because we have evidence of the credibility of their sender. And here's a very apt answer in 2 lines. Your comment is circular. You imply the invalidity of revelations and then ridicule them. The real question isn't, should I believe you, but rather, is the reliability of the news source proven? If it is, then the height of reason is to accept their message, not reject it. The Muslim says, Islam does not oppose science.
The atheist's comment. This video spent time rejecting the scientific study of origins of life. Many Muslims reject the theory of evolution. Many Muslims reject transgenderism and homosexuality. Yeah, Islam opposes science, in lots of ways.
The Muslim replies. This response conflates three distinct things: science as a methodology, individuals' religious beliefs, and philosophical debates on certain issues. First, science is not a set of predetermined results to be accepted or rejected. Rather, it is an empirical methodology based on observation, testing, and modeling. Therefore, it is incorrect to claim that Islam opposes science simply because there are differences in some interpretations or proposed scientific hypotheses. The objection may be to the philosophical interpretation or the limitations of the evidence, not to the scientific method itself. Second, the issue of some Muslims rejecting the theory of evolution or other theories is a social or interpretive stance held by individuals or groups, and does not necessarily reflect the essence of Islam as a system of thought. Confusing religion as a system with the positions of its followers leads to inaccurate generalizations. Third, issues such as homosexuality or gender reassignment are not purely empirical scientific matters. They involve biological, psychological, ethical, philosophical, and legal dimensions. Therefore, the disagreement surrounding it cannot be reduced to a mere opposition to science, because science itself does not solely determine what constitutes moral right or value meaning. Thus, the real issue is not science versus religion as a direct conflict, but rather the boundaries of each. Science describes how phenomena work, while religion and philosophy discuss meaning, value, and the overall interpretation of existence. Confusing these levels is what makes some discussions appear as conflicts, when in reality they are differences in scope, not in principle. The Muslim says, the more knowledge a person gains, the more aware they become of their weakness and need for God.
The atheists comment. This is false. Those with higher learning are less likely to believe in a God than the average person in almost all cultures. The USA, for instance, notes that regular people in that country are about 90% religious, while 41% of scientists are atheist, 26% believe in some sort of higher power but not that of any religion, and only 33% are actually of any established religion. The rest didn't answer.
The Muslim replies. This objection relies on a partial statistical analysis, which is then applied to a general judgment about the relationship between science and faith. However, the issue is far more complex than mere numerical percentages. First, the statistics you cite pertain to specific societies, such as the United States, and a particular professional group, scientists. They cannot be generalized to the relationship between increased science and weakened faith across different cultures, disciplines, and time periods. The relationship between religious, philosophical, or scientific education and religious beliefs is not a single, universally fixed pattern. Second, even within scientific circles, statistics do not imply a lack of faith. Rather, they reflect a diversity of attitudes, ranging from atheism and agnosticism to various forms of belief. This in itself indicates that the issue is not an inevitable scientific conclusion, but rather a philosophical stance influenced by multiple factors: cultural, historical, the specific field of study, and the nature of the questions being asked. Third, the statement that increased knowledge leads to increased awareness of weakness and the need for God is not a direct statistical report, but rather a description of an internal epistemological experience shared by many scientists and philosophers throughout history. In other words, it relates to the existential meaning of knowledge, not to the ratio of believers to non-believers. Science, in itself, does not determine one's religious orientation because it deals with explaining phenomena, while belief, or the lack thereof, pertains to a deeper interpretation of existence, its meaning, and its limits. Therefore, relying solely on statistics does not resolve the question. It merely describes one aspect of social reality without elaborating on the philosophical relationship between scientific knowledge and the existential worldview. Muslims said, this does not mean that atheistic thought, in its modern sense, existed then in the same way we know it today.
Atheist reply. Neither did theistic thought, so I fail to see the relevance.
The Muslim response. The difference is that I didn't say modern theological thought existed in the past. On the contrary, I said the exact opposite regarding atheism, that atheism, in its modern sense, cannot be applied to earlier times. Belief in God, however, is as old as human history itself, while its philosophical schools and forms have changed throughout the ages. Therefore, a distinction must be made between the original concept and its modern intellectual manifestation. Just as it's incorrect to describe everyone who doubted or denied God in ancient times as embracing contemporary philosophical atheism, it's equally incorrect to describe every believer in the past as adopting modern theological conceptions. This is the point, and it's a criterion I apply equally to both. If you want a more concise answer, this comparison is unnecessary because I didn't claim that modern theological thought existed in the past either. My point was about not applying modern concepts to the past, whether it concerns atheism or belief. The original concept is one thing, and its modern intellectual manifestation is another. Muslims said, while it is true that his conception differs from the Abrahamic concept of God in terms of will, providence, and intervention.
Atheist reply. If it has no will, it isn't a God. A device that moves electrical impulses around but does not calculate anything isn't a computer either. So, Aristotle didn't believe in a God. If there was no God, he's an atheist. His conception was basically like a big, self-turning wheel. That's not a God. If you consider that to be a God, then why should we believe Allah is anything else?
The Muslim response. You have changed the criterion for defining God from a historical and descriptive one to a personal doctrinal one. Your statement that Aristotle did not believe in God as in Islam or Christianity, but rather that he had a conception of a divine being different from the Abrahamic God, replaces the historical description with your own personal definition of God. I did not say that Aristotle believed in God according to the Abrahamic conception. I explicitly stated that his conception differed from it in terms of will, providence, and intervention. However, this does not make him an atheist, because atheism is the denial of the existence of any God or any divine being, while Aristotle affirmed the existence of the first mover and considered it eternal, necessary, immaterial, and the ultimate cause of the universe's movement. We may disagree on the nature of this God, but a mere difference in attributes does not transform belief in him into atheism. Otherwise, we would have to label many philosophers and adherents of non-Abrahamic religions as atheists because their conception of God differs from yours, even though they all affirm the existence of a divine being. This conflates a difference in the concept of God with denial of God's existence, which are two entirely different issues. This response puts the discussion in its proper context. An atheist is not simply someone who disagrees with your definition of God, but rather someone who denies the existence of any God whatsoever. Aristotle, however, did not deny the existence of a divine being. Instead, he presented a philosophical conception that differed from the Abrahamic one. Therefore, labeling him an atheist is not the common usage in the history of philosophy, but rather a specific redefinition of the term atheism. Muslims said, if we were to consider every philosophical view that differs from traditional religious theology as atheism, we would have to label many philosophers and metaphysical schools throughout history as atheists, even though they believed in the existence of a universal mind, a first cause, or a transcendent principle.
Atheist reply. A universal mind is a God. A first cause or transcendent principle without a mind is not.
The Muslim response. The disagreement here is not about your conviction or mine, but about the definition of the term God, and that you are establishing your own normative definition and then judging the entire history of philosophy by it. Here you are offering a particular definition of God, and then making this definition the standard by which to classify all philosophers throughout history, while this is not the standard followed in the history of philosophy or the history of religions. Terms such as first cause, transcendent principle, necessary being, and prime mover have been used in philosophy to denote a being that transcends the world, even if conceptions of its attributes differ. The disagreement has always been about the essence and attributes of this being, not its mere existence. Therefore, the question is not, does this being correspond to your definition of God? Rather, it is, does its proponent affirm the existence of a transcendent reality of a divine nature, or does he deny the existence of any such being at all? Those who affirm its existence are not usually described as atheists, even if they contradict the Abrahamic conception of its attributes. In short, what you are saying is merely your own conventional definition, not an agreed-upon historical or philosophical standard. Proving the existence of a first cause or transcendent principle is proving the existence of a reality that transcends nature. The disagreement revolves around its attributes, not its origin. Therefore, it is incorrect to equate every difference in the concept of God with atheism, otherwise metaphysics and atheism become confused, and they are two distinct fields.